In the hills outside Santiago, Chile, in an old abandoned lime kiln held one of the country's darkest secrets. For years, families searched for their missing loved ones. The government said they had vanished. But in 1978, the horrifying truth finally came out. Picture Chile in the mid-1970s, a country gripped by fear. In September of 1973, General Augusto Pinochet seized power in a military coup. Tanks rolled through Santiago. Jets bombed the presidential palace, and the elected president, Salvador Allende, died that day. What followed was a dictatorship that would last for 17 years. Thousands of people were arrested, tortured, or disappeared. Families lived in terror, often too afraid to even ask questions. And when they did, officials gave them cold, rehearsed answers. We don't have them. They must have fled. In October 1973, just weeks after the coup, 15 men from the town of Isla de Maipo were rounded up by police. They weren't high-ranking politicians or generals. They were fathers, farm workers, sons. Some were barely more than teenagers. The men were accused of being leftist sympathizers, but no evidence was ever given. They were loaded into trucks and driven away. Their families stood outside their homes watching, waiting, and expecting the men would come back after questioning, but they never did. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. The wives, mothers, and children begged authorities for answers. They were told they were never in custody, we don't know where they are. But the families knew something terrible had happened. For 4 long years, nothing. No answers, no graves, just silence. Imagine being a mother, tucking in your children at night, unable to tell them whether their father is dead or alive. Imagine being a child, growing up with questions you aren't allowed to ask. This was life in Chile during Pinochet's rule. Fear wasn't just in prisons. It seeped into kitchens, classrooms, and churches. And then, in November 1978, everything changed. A local priest, Father Enrique Moreno Laval, received an anonymous tip. Someone whispered that the men of Isla de Maipo hadn't disappeared at all. They were nearby, hidden in an old, abandoned lime kiln in the hills of Lonquén. Father Moreno didn't know if it was true, but the weight of those families' grief pushed him to act. One morning, he drove out to the countryside. The kiln stood like a broken ruin against the hillside. Dark, quiet, forgotten. He stepped inside, flashlight in hand, and what he saw froze him in place. Bones, skulls, torn pieces of clothing. It was no rumor. The ovens of Lonquén were a secret grave. Father Moreno knew this discovery was dangerous. To speak out against the regime was to risk his own life, but he couldn't stay silent. He told the families. Human rights lawyers came. Journalists whispered the news. Soon, investigators arrived. The truth could no longer be buried. Inside the ovens, they found the remains of 15 missing men. After years of lies, their families finally had answers, but the answers were horrifying. The men had been executed and hidden, their bodies dumped in the ovens as if they were trash. The discovery of the Lonquén ovens shook Chile. It was the first undeniable proof that the dictatorship had been lying about the disappeared. But the government fought back. Officials tried to suppress reports. Some claimed it was communist propaganda, but it was too late. The bones were real, the clothes were real, the families were real. International human rights groups seized on Lonquén as evidence. The world was watching. For years, trials went nowhere. Pinochet remained in power, and the ovens of Lonquén stood silent. Families mourned, but they still had no justice. It wasn't until democracy returned in the 1990s that the case was reopened. Eventually, some of the police officers who carried out the killings were identified and sentenced. But for many Chileans, justice felt incomplete. No sentence could undo what was done or erase the years of silence. Today, the Lonquén ovens are preserved as a memorial. People visit not just to honor the 15 men, but to confront what Chile lived through. The ovens tell us something chilling, that secrets don't stay buried forever. Even in the darkest times, the truth has a way of clawing its way into the light. For the families, the ovens meant grief, but they also meant the end of silence. The ovens of Lonquén weren't just graves. They were evidence that even when the powerful try to erase the truth, bones remember. This was a really sad tragedy to learn about. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments.